We're talking today with Jim Joyce of Cypress, Texas, and the interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Okay, start us off with some background on yourself, and to begin with, where and when were you born?
I was born in Springfield, Missouri.
In what year?
In 1948.
Okay. And did you grow up there, or did you move around?
Well, I grew up in Springfield, pretty much. My family, my sister, my dad was a World War II vet.
Mm-hmm. And what was your family doing for a living when you were a kid?
My dad ran a engineer's blueprint and supply company for engineers, and he was also an electrical engineer himself.
All right. And did you graduate from high school?
Yes, I did. I graduated from Nixa High School in Nixa, Missouri, which is just south of Springfield.
Okay, and what year?
That was 1966.
Okay. And what did you do after you got out of high school?
Well, after high school, I went to the University of Missouri in Columbia, Missouri, for the summer school, and had a great time. My grades were not very good, though. Unfortunately, they didn't ask me to come back for the fall semester.
Oh.
So then I went back home to Springfield, and I worked in various odd jobs. I had worked in a gas station, a couple of different gas stations, drove a truck, a tow truck for one of them. But Vietnam was becoming quite an issue at that particular time. This was in 1967, 68. And after Tet in 1968, I thought that it would be a good thing to join the Army.
Okay, for patriotic reasons or to control your destiny, or?
Well, a little bit of both. My father, as I said, was a World War II vet. He flew Hellcats off the carriers in the South Pacific during World War II, and I had a great amount of respect for that. He was one of those guys that on December 8th, 1941, he joined the Navy. One of those guys. So I come from a long line of patriotism and that sort of thing. So it was a mix of both. The other one was I didn't really know what my life was going to bring, and so I said, hey, let's see what this does.
Okay. Why did you choose the Army?
Well, they carry rifles and blow things up, right? So, I didn't want to fly. I didn't want to float around on a boat. I wanted to go blow things up and shoot things. So.
All right. I guess even the Marines float around on boats some of the time. So.
Yeah. So Marines were a little crazy at that time.
Now, so when did you actually enlist?
I enlisted, I can remember it to this day. It was February 25th, 1968.
All right. And when you signed up, did the recruiter offer you anything in terms of possible training or specialization, or were you just signing up to see where they put you?
Well, when I enlisted with the local agent in Springfield where I signed up, I wanted to be airborne infantry. Wanted to jump out of airplanes with guns and go shoot things and blow things up. So that sounded like a really good plan to me.
Okay.
And so I enlisted for airborne infantry. And that was what I signed up for. Although an interesting story, if you'll know, maybe you don't know, in 1968, the Marines were having a hard time getting recruits. They were falling behind.
Yeah.
And so I remember the morning of the 26th of February, 1968, when I woke up in Kansas City and all at the Army Induction Center, and they said, all right, everybody line up and count off by threes. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And they said, all you threes, take one step to the left. They moved over. They said, congratulations, you're now United States Marines. Move them out.
So it didn't matter at that point whether they were draftees or enlistees?
Apparently not, which is a little scary because I had a contract with them. So I don't know what they would have done if I had been a 3. I was a 2. I don't know what would have happened. I think I would have said something.
Yeah.
But interesting, a little side bit there.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, I mean, the Army might have stood up for you because you signed up for 3 years.
3 years, that's what I
Okay.
signed up for.
Okay. All right. Now, and did you do a physical there?
Yes.
Okay. Now, there are sometimes stories or things in movies about people trying to scam the system and beat the physicals in different ways or pretend to have medical conditions or whatever else. Did you observe anything like that?
Actually, I have to tell this story. I had a metal pin in my left ankle from an old football injury in high school. And there was apparently a little bit of redness or some inflammation around it or something, or maybe it was just the fact that it was there at all. So, well, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself.
That's okay.
I went through the medical induction earlier. It was in the fall.
Okay.
And they rejected me because I had a pin in my ankle. So I went back home and I had the surgery to have the pin removed and then reapplied, and that's when I was accepted, and that's when I went to Kansas City. So I had a natural made way to get out.
Yeah.
I didn't have to go at all. In fact, it was bona fide reason, you know.
Yeah.
And, but I had it removed so that I could serve.
Okay. All right. So where did they send you then for basic training?
Basic training was Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, and I did basic training there.
Okay. Describe what basic training was like at that point in time.
Well, I went through March and April, and in Missouri is if you don't like the weather, wait 10 minutes. So we would march out to the rifle range with blowing snow in our parkas and jacket liners and poncho liner, everything, you know, and by 10 a.m. it was, 70 degrees and the sun was shining. So it was interesting, but it was training with with the M14, not the M16 yet, because the M14 was the weapon they used in basic training.
All right. How much emphasis was there on discipline?
Quite a bit, quite a bit. We were taught very carefully all the rules of, you know, when you salute officers and when you don't, and where you stand, and what is a at rest and what is a parade rest, and you know, they taught us how to march and make turns, and you know, in other words, take a bunch of street urchins and try to make soldiers out of them.
Okay. And how easy or hard was it for you to adjust to that?
It wasn't that difficult. I mean, I remember thinking, oh man, these guys aren't joking about getting up early in the morning, are they? You know? And so, but everybody's doing it, so hey, okay, we're cool with this. It wasn't that hard.
Okay. So you just tried to do what they told you and...
Stay out of trouble.
Okay. Now, were there people who did have trouble?
Well, there were some people. They'd get in fights and stuff, and you know, look, we got plenty of fighting left to do. You know, other places. I don't know why we have to fight ourselves, but they'd get in trouble. But
Okay. And how did the drill instructors treat you?
pretty fairly, I think. You know, there's they need to be, you know, difficult at some times. You know, they need to be tough. They need to be hard. They want to, you know, instill that you know, there's the pain of the United States Army will come down on you if you don't do this. You know, but truth be a different matter. But at any rate, they tried to teach us the fear of the military machine, and you know, you better do what we want to do.
Okay.
And obey, you know, the president is the big boss, you know, you obey him, you know, and then you've the chain of command, and you got to know that. They did a pretty good job. I can't complain too much.
All right. Did you have a sense that some of those people had been to Vietnam, or could you not tell?
I don't think any of them had been to Vietnam, the guys in basic training. They were more Korea guys.
Okay.
I mean, I didn't get the impression about Vietnam at all in basic training.
All right. And how long did basic training last?
That was 8 weeks, I think.
So that's the standard.
Yeah.
Okay. And then Did you then go on to specialized training for airborne infantry, or what comes next?
Yes, I did. Let's see. Was it first? What was first?
Well, you would have an advanced individual training.
Jump School or AIT? No, it was Jump School was the next one.
All right. And where was that, and what did they do?
Well, Jump School was at Fort Benning, Georgia, and that is a very rapid, hard-paced 3-week program where they take you from street level to 1,200 feet and jump out of an airplane at least 5 times within those 3 weeks. But it's intensive physical training, intensive. I mean, I came out of Jump School in the best shape I've ever been in my life, and that's football included and all that stuff. I was a lean machine, so it was very physical. It was also training, and it was a very rigorous program. So I enjoyed it.
Okay. So you remember the first time you jumped out of an airplane?
Yes, I do.
What was that like?
That was interesting. It was the most interesting jump I've ever had, and I've got 189 military jumps after that. But the first one was out of a C-119, 1,200 feet over Georgia, and I jumped out of one side of the 119, and they've got 2 doors on both sides. And when I jumped out, the first thing they tell you to do is, you jump out, you count, 1, 2, 3, and then you check your canopy. That means check and look up and make sure you have a full canopy, because that's what you want. Well, I jumped out, and I looked up, and I saw the shadow of a human body spread eagle on top of my canopy. And they didn't teach me that in Jump School.
Maybe not.
They don't say, now if somebody lands on your parachute, here's what you do. Nobody said that. So I saw this profile through the light, and I saw this guy on my canopy. And I said, hey, get off my canopy. And he said, what do I do? What do I do? And I said, roll off. Get off, somehow. And so I see him flailing around, and then he falls off and goes past me.
Well, didn't he have a chute?
He did have a chute, but it was starting to collapse.
Oh, because he wasn't pulling down on it because he was stuck on yours.
He was stuck on mine. I was coming down, so I had stolen all of his air.
Oh.
Because my parachute captured all the air, so his parachute had opened, but it was just kind of fluffing around.
So he jumped too soon, or out of the other side of the plane? Or?
He jumped out of the other side of the plane, and this is the afterward analysis of this. I was heavier and bigger than he was. He was a lieutenant, by the way, and I was a private. But anyway, I was heavier, and he was lighter. And so we apparently jumped out at exactly the same time. And the way the 119 is configured, it's called a flying boxcar. There's no real tail on it. The tail is up here. So apparently I was a little bit heavier, and I went underneath, and our parachutes inflated as we were coming together, and that's how it happened. And he rolled off and fell past me, and then he stole my air, and because his parachute inflates right here next to mine, and so mine waffles, and so I slide off the other side, and I rechecked my canopy, and by that time we had already fallen almost 800 feet, almost 1,000 feet, and so it was like right there, and the ground was boom. So that first jump was a real interesting jump.
Wow.
And I've never had another one like that.
Just as well.
So,
okay,
anyway.
But that did not turn you off to jumping out of airplanes?
No, I thought that was pretty cool. I wanted to do it again.
Okay. All right, so you get through jump school, and then you get AIT after that?
Yes.
And where was that?
That was at Fort Gordon, Georgia. They had just started a new camp. It was not on the main base of Fort Gordon, Georgia. It was out in the swamp. And it was called Camp Crockett. Camp Crockett, Georgia was a direct need to train people for Vietnam. This was the first time that I knew that this is Vietnam training, because we lived in huts in the swamp in Georgia, and we ate sea rations for the most part. We took showers out of bags of water, and you know, we drank water from blister bags, and I mean it was Camp Vietnam, is what it was. And we lived out there with no AC, no, I mean there's no comforts of home. There was no Baskin and Robbins, you know, nothing was out there. Just us and a bunch of guys and the trainers.
All right. And was this pretty much straight infantry training at this point?
Yeah, this was the infantry AIT that I had signed up for. They sent me to jump school. If I had bombed out of jump school, then they would have had me, you know, they could have done anything they wanted to me with them. But anyway, so then this was the AIT infantry training for Vietnam. And that was where we got to shoot things and blow things up and throw hand grenades until we turned blue in the face, and you know, just, oh man, that was a lot of fun.
Okay. Were your instructors there people who had been to Vietnam?
Yes, for the most part, they were people that had been there, been to Vietnam.
And did they share much advice or anything like that, or?
I believe they did. Yes. I remember sometimes the drill instructor, one of the rifle instructors, he said, when you're in Vietnam, he said, you're really, most of the time, you're not going to have time to raise your rifle to your eye and sight through it. He said, most of your shooting is going to be done at the ground, at the waist level. He said, really, I mean, and particularly in an ambush. So you need to know how to shoot from here. And they taught us how to shoot from the hip. And it's like your finger. You'd be surprised how accurate you are when you point your finger at something. I mean, you know, you're pretty accurate. So if you make your weapon an extension of your finger, you can hit things. And they had, I remember one training class, they had these little discs, little aluminum discs of various sizes. Maybe the biggest one was that size down to quarter. And they had us some BB guns. And they'd throw them up in the air, and you'd hit it with a BB gun without sighting. You know, you'd hit the disc. And the instructor said, "We're all going to do that." He said, "First of all, said, is there anybody in this group that has ever shot skeet?" And there were a couple of us raised their hand. And one guy got up there, and he threw the big disc up, and the guy tried to hit it, he couldn't hit it, and he said, "Where's that other skeet shooter?" It was me. And he said, "Come on up here," with a little BB gun, you know. And he threw up the big disc, and I hit it. He said, "See, that's easy." And he's trying to show the other guys, he said, "We can do that." He threw up the big one. Bing. Yeah. Let's try. Let's go a little bit smaller. Let's go down to 50-cent piece. Yeah. Bing. And then, and he said, "Well, a quarter. Let's try a quarter. Let's see if they get it." Bing. Hit the quarter. And then it got to be a challenge. And he said, "I got a dime in my pocket." And this is the drill instructor. And he takes the dime and he throws the dime up. And he didn't find the dime. The dime was gone. Anyway, we had a class on how to shoot from the hip using BB guns.
All right. Now, were they teaching you anything about Vietnamese society or how to deal with the population there, or was that not part of what you did?
That was not part of the training.
So you were living in hooches, but you were not interacting with quasi-Vietnamese or anything like that?
No,
Okay.
no. Now, they had some mock-up Vietnamese villages that we would go through, and they had some live fire things, and you know, it's like, because you're going to come through a lot of villages, you're going to walk into villages and see things, and you need to know how to approach a village.
Okay.
So,
Now, were all of you kind of heading for airborne, or was this where you were just could be anywhere in the Army?
we were all airborne.
Okay. All right. So was that a standard 8-week AIT, or was it longer? Or?
It was a little longer. It was 12 weeks.
Okay.
because they had another, you know, the booby traps and tripwires, pardon me, and things like that they taught us how to do.
All right. Okay. Now, once you complete that, what do they do with you?
Well, then I had signed up. They asked me before AIT. They said, "Would you be interested in becoming certified as a parachute packer?"
Mm-hmm.
They call them riggers, parachute rigger. And I had signed a paper saying, sure, why not? So after the infantry AIT, they shipped me off to Fort Lee, Virginia, where I went through I think a 16-week, parachute packing, maintenance, and airdrop course. And that was a lot of fun. You learned how to pack a parachute. You learned how to fix a parachute. You learned how to sew. Use 7 different kinds of machines, sewing machines, from the little tiny ones that you use for the parachute cloth to the ones that wouldn't fit in this room right now. I mean, they're meant to sew through like 6 thick, nylon straps and put them together. So that was a lot of fun. Became seamstresses.
You also learn how to throw things out of the back of aircraft?
Yes, and that was fun. We learned how to take Jeeps and 2.5 trucks and tanks and how to pack them on these skids and put them in aircraft and put chutes on them and shove them out of the back of aircraft. And the most fun was getting to follow them out, because the big ones like the trucks and stuff, they have a chute that drags them out. You don't push those things out. It's too heavy. They're on rollers, but you still need to get them out of there. So you got a drogue chute. You inflate the drogue chute, and that's what pulls them out of the aircraft. And then once they're after, then you just take running and you jump off the end of the aircraft, and you get to follow it down, and you get to watch your work in action.
How high up would you be when you're doing that?
About 1,500 feet.
Okay. So it would take a little while for anything to slow down a falling truck.
Yeah, that's why it's 1,500 feet. You don't want to go much underneath that, because you have, depending upon the weight, you can have 2 or 3 chutes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. So now, I guess, when you're not training, did you get to go off base and do anything else, or did you have any free time?
Let's see.
Fort Lee.
Well, we did, yeah, and that was the one time that we were in Fort Lee proper, and Petersburg, Virginia was just right there, and so there were girls, and we could go to local bars and things, and so we could do that.
Yeah, probably not a lot of that you could do at Camp Crockett, even if they let you.
No, there was no opportunity at Camp Crockett at all.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So you've kind of gone and done this. So in terms of the calendar, when do you finish that at Fort Lee?
Well, let's see. I finished at Fort Lee right around Christmas time in 1968.
Yeah.
Yeah. About Christmas '68, and there was, I was the what do they call them? What's the salutatorian? I guess it's the second highest ranking person in the parachute packing, maintenance, and airdrop course. And so there was talk. In fact, the first sergeant had told me, he said, "Joyce, we're going to keep you here as a cadre. We're going to keep you here to train these other people because you did such a good job. You're smart. You know how to do this stuff." And I said, "Well, Sarge, it's kind of wanting to go see some action." And he said, "But if that's what you guys want, and that's the Army, and I want to serve my country. So if that's what you think is the best for the country, okay, all right." So I told everybody, I said, "Well, looks like I'm going to be staying here in Fort Lee, Virginia." And then in January, my orders came down for Vietnam. And so I thought, okay, I thought one thing, but you know, anyway, all right, we're back on track.
All right. Did you get to go home for Christmas? Or?
I did not, because I thought I stayed there because they needed a certain number of people to stay over
Okay.
Christmas. And I thought, well, heck, I'll just go home after this because I'm going to be sticking around. And then I didn't get a
Okay.
chance.
But now that you've got orders for Vietnam, do you get leave first and then you go, or
I get what first?
did you get leave? Did you get to go home before you went to Vietnam?
Yes, I did. And so January, I left Fort Lee, went home. I got a 30-day special leave because you're going to a war zone, so I didn't get charged that leave. And then February, or the late February, early March. March '69 is when I arrived in Vietnam.
Okay. So how do they get you to Vietnam?
Well, I got on the airplane here in Springfield, and I flew from here to Fort Lewis, Washington. I got in the train where they get you all set up, and they give you what you're going to need to get over there, and then you get on a Flying Tiger airline, and you fly Flying Tiger nonstop. No, let's see, we went from Fort Lewis Air Base, or McChord Air Force Base, actually, it's Fort Lewis. McChord to Anchorage, Alaska, and then nonstop Anchorage to Saigon.
Okay.
Or
did
Tan Son Nhut Air
you
Base.
landed at Tan Son Nhut. Okay. Did you land at night or during the day?
At night.
Okay. So what's your first impression of Vietnam when you get there?
Well, I'm glad you asked that. I remember walking off the aircraft, you know. I mean, it's perfectly good shape, good aircraft, everything's fine. And you get to the door, and the heat and the humidity, it's like somebody hit you in the face with a wet sponge. I mean, it's like, it's just oppressive. I mean, and of course, I got used to that really quick. But the first night when you get off of that, it's like, wow, this is something. And so then they put us on some buses or on a truck, or probably a truck. They don't have buses in Vietnam. Truck, and took us to a holding camp for the next day. We were going to get, because it's at night. Next day we'll get sorted out and shipped off to our various units. So at first night, they took us to a barracks, and it's just a wooden hut with bunk beds, you know, lower and upper, all the way around, and the mattresses were rolled up at one end, so, you know, it's just the standard military thing. And they said, all right, you guys, here you go. If you hear these sirens going off at night, that means there's a rocket attack. It's kind of matter-of-factly, you know. And so what you do is you get down on the floor and you pull your mattress down on top of it. Because we get these 122 millimeter Katyusha rockets that come in every now and then. And, you know, we see them come in, and so we sound the sirens and just let you know. And is there a bunker? No, there's no bunker. Just, you'll be all right. Just get on the floor and pull your mattress down on top of you, and you'll be all right. So everybody's okay. So I had a top bunk, and sure enough, that night, I remember being awake and I heard the woo, and sirens going off, and everybody's like, "Is that the siren?" Well, yeah, sure sounds like a siren. Well, what do we do? It's, well, you get on the floor and pull the mattress on top of you. I just grabbed my mattress on both sides and rolled out of the top bunk and hit the ground face first with the mattress on the back of me. I wasn't going to take any chances. I'm sorry, I don't talk this much usually.
Okay.
But yeah, rocket attack first night. That always makes you feel welcome. So the next day, they sorted us out, and they put me on a C-130 up to Phu Bai. And then somebody was there with a deuce and a half to pick me up to 426th S&S Battalion, and went up there and got processed in
All right.
Camp Eagle.
Okay. So this is the SNS stands for.
Support and Supply, I think.
Okay. But it's part of the 101st Airborne.
Oh yeah.
And they're the ones who are responsible for parachute rigging, and was that the job you got, or did you?
Yes, that's what we did.
All right. And you're up in the far northern part of South Vietnam, because that's kind of where the 101st Airborne is operating.
High Court. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, what kind of setup did you have, or what kind of greeting did you get when you joined the unit?
Well, the greeting was fine. It was, some people that I had known from Benning were there. One guy, Kilpatrick, a guy, Jimmy Kilpatrick, I think his name was, or Michael. He was there. He was a rigger at Benning that I knew when I was in jump school. So he was there, and he was one of the sergeants there. So anyway, I mean, it was, riggers are kind of like pathfinders. It's a tight group, and we've all got a lot in common because there's only one rigger school in the world. So we all know that. But it was good. We had a good setup. Had little plywood hooches with real metal roof, and so things got okay.
All right. And how long did you stay with that unit?
I was with that unit about 9 months.
All right. I guess talk a little bit about what you did with them. Once you got there, you start working. What are you doing?
Well, when I first got there, we had some basic maintenance to do. I mean, we packed parachutes. There was some jumping, not a lot that went on, but there was some jumping. So we did pack some T-10s. We packed a few of the chutes for the Air Force, the Martin Bakers. We would pack those for them. And most of our work was not with parachutes, but with sling loads. We were in great demand because we could sling load out artillery pieces, aircraft, ammunition, connexes. We shipped stuff out of Camp Eagle to all of the fire bases. Their sea rations, their ice, their sodas, their beer, everything went out of Eagle and it went by air. And so it needed to be rigged to go by air. CH-47s, they've just got a hook. So you got to, the weight of the thing, the position, is it going to rotate? How is it going to fly? Is it going to fly straight? Is it going to spin? You don't want loads that are going to spin. So we had to know how to load these things, and this was something that they don't really teach you in the States. You need to learn how to rig a 10-foot square metal box, or a 105, which requires 2 8s and a 12, as opposed to a 155, which takes 2 16s and 4 8s. So you got to have you got to know this stuff. So we went to all the fire bases. Whenever you're moving artillery, whenever you're moving from one fire base to another or one location to another, you need a rigger.
Okay, so you're not just loading things up at Camp Eagle and waving goodbye.
No.
You were getting on the helicopters and going with them.
Yes.
Okay. And did you also load things onto fixed-wing aircraft? Were there transports that would drop things out the back, or was that someone else's job?
No, that was our job, but that was very rarely done. Very rarely done. A chute extraction from fixed wing, we only did that 2 or 3 times my whole time in Vietnam, and it was because you need a long flat area to get that. You get a lot of equipment in, but you need a long flat area like a runway to get things in. It just doesn't exist.
Yeah, and certainly not on the fire bases.
No, so we were a fixture at all the fire bases. We fire base hopped. We went around and did wild and crazy things.
All right. Now, were you doing this at the time of the Ripcord campaign in 1970?
This is before Ripcord.
That's right, because you get there, because you're there in fairly early '69. Ripcord is not until well later than. Okay, so you're doing this, but were you doing this? But the 101st goes to Hamburger Hill and into the A Shaw Valley in the summer of '69. Were you part of that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I was at Currahee, which is at the foothill of Hamburger Hill, and because that was the closest fire base to Hamburger Hill, and so there was a 105 battery, an ARVN battery there, Actually, there were two 105 batteries. We didn't have any 155s. The 155s had to come from Berchtesgaden. BG was over here, and then the other one.
Bastogne?
Not Bastogne. Eagle's Nest or something like that. Anyway. So we were on the floor of the Ashok Valley. BG, and they were up on the mountains.
Mm-hmm.
We were in the floor at the base of the hill, and we got a ground attack one night. And they were in the wire, and it was looking pretty bad for us. In fact, we didn't even have a Pathfinder Currahee at Currahee at that time. And so the 105s, the 105s were firing zero elevation flechette rounds out through the wire. They were just saturation.
So it was like giant shotguns.
Yeah, like a giant shotgun, and we had enemy in the wire. It was a full-on assault.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember this one of my first experiences. This is one of the reasons why I wanted to become a Pathfinder anyway, or went to Pathfinders. We had a what they call it, spooky, or some they call them Puff the Magic Dragon. It's a C-47 with two miniguns stuck out the side, on one side, and they're muffled down. You can't see them, you can't hear them. They fly with no lights, and we had called one on station because we didn't think we were going to make it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I remember that I was the ranking rigger on the hill, and I spoke better English than the other people, and so they wanted me to talk to the spooky pilot.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is one of my greatest experiences in Vietnam, and I hope to get this on tape. I remember them telling me, "Spooky's on. Go here's the frequency." And so I got on the radio, and this guy from the south, he said, "Kara, hey, this is Spooky 19er coming on your station, sir. Over." And I mean, just the biggest hick accent. I don't know if he was putting me on or not. Anyway, and I was pretty tight. I said, "Yeah, Spooky 19er, we've got them in the wire, and we've got." He said, "Are they inside your perimeter yet?" And I said, "I don't believe so." And he said, "Light up your perimeter with strobes so I can see where your perimeter is." And so I switched the frequencies, and I got a hold of the batteries, and I said, put your strobes out on your perimeters, right in front of you. Put your strobes out. So he wants to know where our perimeter is. And they did. And then he comes back on, and I was in, stupidly, I was in this little elevated thing that they used to use. They would run Cobras in and out of there occasionally. And so they had this little tower built. It was like 5 feet off the ground. It was built out of ammo boxes and stuff. And maybe there might have been some dirt in some of the ammo boxes. I don't know. But nothing really to stop anything. So I was up there kind of looking around to get a bird's eye view. Yeah, I can see the perimeter, 19er, we're okay. He said, "Where are you?" And he said, "Well, I'm up here." And he said, and using his accent, and I'm not good at this, but he said, "Kara, hey, I'm gonna lay down a little bit of fire here, and you let me know if it's too close or not." And I said, "Okay." Can't hear him, can't see him, anything. And then all of a sudden, this stream of red came down out of the sky. And the tracers, and this god-awful sound like a roar from some beast from hell. I can't even. I mean, just this odd, god-awful. And you could see the red, and you could see the ground just vibrating. And that was right in front of me. In front of me. And that was kind of scary. And so, and then that was over, and then he said, "Kara, hey, how was that?" And I said, "Well, we're all okay here, but you might want to move it out just a little bit and then let it rip." And he did. And he stayed on station until he was out of ammo. And the 105s were still blowing flechettes. They were running out of flechettes. And I think some of them even put, HE on target. I mean, at 0 level. And then it kind of slowed down after that, and then the spooky left, and we were under control then, and the next day we saw what had happened, and the miniguns were very effective. Incredibly effective. And we had a big mess, and I don't want to talk about that.
That's fine. But so there were definitely people out there who got hit.
You bet. Yeah, there was a lot of that.
All right. Now, was that sort of the only time you had that kind of a close call with enemy ground forces, or I guess you have other stories as a Pathfinder and things later on?
That was my my most dramatic story as a rigger. Mm-hmm. There was another one that was also in Currahee. This was about 3 days earlier. Like I said, we ran some Cobras out of Currahee, and there was. They didn't spend the night there, but they would come in. We had some 2.75 rockets that they would reload, and they'd fly. They'd go do their mission. They'd come back and reload. Well, I remember there was a Cobra that was sitting there. Stopped. The pilot was out, and he was actually on the hill. And they were going to load his rocket launchers, and we started getting mortar rounds. And we saw the first mortar round come in, right in front. Then the second, they were walking them in. And everybody knew they were going for the helicopter. They want that helicopter. So they had an FO, they had a forward observer, somehow, who was watching, and he was saying, adjust it, he was telling them how to adjust it. So this pilot and everybody else, they know what's happening. He runs the aircraft. I'm thinking, man, are you sure? He runs to the aircraft, he gets in, and he's going for a cold start, meanwhile, these rockets, these mortars are walking in, and he's not, we're all saying, he's not going to make it, he's not going to make it. And finally, he just got off the ground. Mm-hmm. It was seconds. So that was impressive. A bit of courage or stupidity. I don't know what it was, but and actually they did catch one of the pallets of the rockets.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now, would you be going out to fire bases pretty much every day or several times a week, or would you spend a lot of time back in Phu Bai?
Probably 80% of my time was on fire bases.
Okay.
Occasionally we'd get to come back and we'd take some showers and stuff. especially when a fire base would move. You know, we would rig them, and then we would fly with them to the new place.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was a good thing, our quarters were right next to 101st Aviation, where all the Chinooks in the world come to roost at night. So we would just stay on the aircraft and come back. And that was our transportation.
All right. Were some fire bases better than others, at least to stay at?
Oh yeah, yeah. Bastogne was great. I love Bastogne. Rakkasan was horrible. Oh my gosh, the one, and of course now I'm jumping a little bit ahead to my Pathfinder days. Fire Base Sally, one of the most beautiful places in the world. It's up on the top of this mountain. It's a peak. It's actually like you've seen these things in Hawaii. You know, it's like a razor blade almost. That's where Sally went. And every morning you'd wake up on Sally and you'd look down and you'd see the clouds. Bright sunshine every morning. Bright sunshine. Look down and see the clouds coming up. As the morning wore on, the clouds would rise up, and then you'd be in the clouds and you'd be socked in. You'd see anything. You couldn't see your hand in front of your face until it would rise up above you, and then you could see the jungle. So it was every morning. It was the same thing. You'd wake up, bright sunshine. You're above the clouds. You know, so you can receive air traffic in the morning, but then there's around 8:30 to 11, you're socked in. So yeah,
Did the NVA ever try to kind of climb up under the clouds to get into the base?
not a chance. No, they wouldn't.
All right. Okay. Now, when you were back on the base at Phu Bai, what was life like there?
Well, life wasn't too bad. The mess hall that we used, which was the, I don't remember the name of the brigade, but brigade headquarters was kind of down the road and up the, so they had their own mess hall. It was first class.
Yeah.
And so it was always a real treat to get to come back and go to the battalion mess hall.
All right. Now, there are an assortment of sort of stereotypes about Vietnam and how people behaved over there, particularly in rear areas. One of them is that there was a lot of drug use on the bases. I mean, did you observe much of that, or was that?
There was a lot of marijuana being smoked because it was sold on the streets. I mean, on the roads into the fire base. The Vietnamese would sell it to you. There was a lot of that, and as to how bad it was, I mean, usually it was the guys in the rear kind of blowing off steam.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way I kind of looked at it. They weren't allowed to pull guard duty or anything while they were high. So they watched that pretty carefully. But yeah, there was.
Would that extend to the fire bases, or were those usually cleaner?
Fire bases, you didn't find it. I mean, it was rare. In fact, if somebody was found out that they were smoking pot out there, they were shunned. People didn't want to work with them.
All right.
So that's the way that worked.
Okay. And then the other thing has to do with race relations. You do the black soldiers on the bases separate themselves from the white ones, and were there tensions or conflicts?
You would see that back in the rear areas sometimes, but out in the field, there was no color. There was no color at all. At least that's my experience.
All right. Now, looking over the time that you spent as a rigger, are there any particular events or memories that kind of stand out for you that you haven't talked about yet?
Mhm. There was one time. It's a kind of a good story, an interesting story. We were moving an artillery battery, actually 3 batteries, for an ARVN. It's all South Vietnamese Army.
Mm-hmm.
There were no U.S. military advisors, and we were moving them to a new fire base, and it was a Herculean effort. I mean, it was 3 batteries, one day. We had to shuttle the straps back and forth, extra quick because we were moving all those many guns and all the ammo. And we worked very hard that day. And when we got everything moved over, the Vietnamese colonel, I think he was a colonel, he said, before you guys go back, he said, I want you to come with me, you're going to be my guest. And so he had already had prepared in his bunker a table, and he had already had a meal planned out for us. I mean, this was to thank us.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a lavish meal, a lot of bush meat, I mean, there was some, probably monkey meat, and I know there was at least one monkey because I saw a monkey head there, but rice and some vegetables and other things, and they had blood pudding. We called it blood pudding, but it's where they take the poor unfortunate monkey,
Mm-hmm.
and they bled him out into a wooden pan. It's kind of a flat wooden pan until and they wait a little while until the blood coagulates.
Mm-hmm.
And then they cut it into strips and they serve it over rice. And we had been told that if ever you're offered
Mm-hmm.
something, that you need to eat it. And so we did.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I mean, there were things that were good, but we choked it all down. We got it down. But at the end of the meal, this is one of the things that just blew me away, because here we are, we're in Vietnam, it's 110 degrees in the shade. The humidity's 110%. And he produces these 3 watermelons, ice cold. I didn't see any ice on the hill. I mean, I know everything that came on this hill. I didn't see any ice on the hill. Anyway, we had ice cold watermelon for dessert, and the colonel was very pleased, and that was one of those things that nobody will ever know.
All right. So how did you wind up becoming a Pathfinder?
Well, in my runnings around on fire bases and doing so much work with helicopters and climbing through the hole, and what they call climbing through the holes, when you hook up a helicopter or you rig up a gun, there's a square hole in the bottom of a CH-47 where the crew chief lays down, and the hook's right there in front of him, and so that he can tell the pilot 2 feet forward, left, right, so we would hook up and we would climb through the hole. So we got to know the Pathfinders, because we'd tell the Pathfinder, tell that bird I'm going to hook him up and then come through the hole. And so then, the crew chief knew that I'm going to come up through the hole. Anyway, so we got to know those guys and got to, hang with them, and they were just really a neat bunch of guys. And so I petitioned to transfer to the Pathfinders. And so they did. In late February of '70, I transferred to the Pathfinders, and I had some training to catch up on, because I wasn't trained as a Pathfinder in stateside. So they gave me some classes and was trained there in country. and you know, all the radio skills and all the, you know, how do you land an aircraft under these conditions? You know, how do you do this? How do you do that?
So what would the job description of a Pathfinder be?
Well, there were everything to do to facilitate air transport. That was basically it. The landing, the insertion of aircraft, everything that had to do with the combat assaults. It's like Pathfinder says, FILO, F-I-L-O, first in, last out. Pathfinders were on the first bird going into every combat assault. If it was hot, there was an air medal for you, but you know, at least you know, you got it. And then you were on the last bird out. You were there during the whole combat assault. You didn't leave until the last bird. You caught the last bird out. So that was pretty cool. They had cool weapons. They had a Car-15. Not with everybody else used the M16, which is a good weapon. But we had a Car-15, which is a commando style.
Okay, so it's a little bit smaller.
A little bit smaller, barrel's a little bit shorter, a little bit faster rate of fire. But it's basically, I mean, the same thing, same ammo, but it's a CAR called a Commando Assault Rifle. And so they would go in the field, we would do combat assaults, we would do air traffic control at all the fire bases. I mean, if you wanted to land at any fire base, or if you wanted to get close to any fire base, you better give that Pathfinder a call. Because, you know, there's artillery coming out of these things, and you don't want to be flying, you know, so you call the Pathfinder and say, hey, what kind of hazards you got? And the Pathfinders would say, I've got one at 243 degrees, max order is 16,000 feet, max range 8 clicks, you know, and said, I got another one over here at 98 degrees. And so they would know, don't come in on those hazards.
Okay. Now, would a Pathfinder basically just sort of come and go with the air missions, or would you go onto a base and stay there and direct traffic? Or?
You would generally go to a fire base and you would stay there for a week or two, or even sometimes longer. And you had your own, our own hooches there, and the Pathfinders would hang out. Somebody had to be on the radio 24/7. And so, you know, if you're on a fire base, you need 3 people at least. So you would go there and you'd rotate in and out. People would come, people would go.
Okay. All right. Now, you become a Pathfinder shortly before what comes to be the Ripcord campaign gets started, because their first attempt to establish the base was in the middle of March. Now, were you involved in any of those efforts or insertions? Because they make 3 different attempts to establish the base, the last one on foot. But
I was not on the first 2. After the final taking of Ripcord, I was sent there, and in fact, that was my kind of graduation present. I was given, because I was an E5, I was given Ripcord is your fire base.
okay.
So you make all the staffing decisions, and who goes there, who doesn't, who does what, who does radio, who does, you know. And so that was my graduation present. So I was out there when we opened it up. I mean, when we finally dug in. I built the fire base. I mean, I built the bunker there for the Pathfinders, the Pathfinder bunker, which was remarkably robust and withstood many mortar attacks. In fact, I remember I was just talking to downstairs with Tim Bohan, his brother, who I sent out there, was helping me build the bunker. And I mean, we were working hard because we were under fire. We were taking small arms fire the whole time. You know, so you got your steel pod, you got your flak jacket on, you got everything. You know, you're hunkered down, but you're trying to dig down. You dig in. So we did. We dug in with a combination of ammo boxes, covered halves, sandbags, massively stacked on top. And his brother Pat, who was later killed on Ripcord, he said to me, he said, Sergeant Joyce, he said, they just brought a big, one of the artillery battery mess kitchens brought up a big pot of Kool-Aid. You know, that's cool, it's cold. Actually, they had some ice and they made some Kool-Aid with it. And it's that shiny, you know, thing you used to see. And they brought it up, and of course all the artillery guys run over there to it, you know, and there's a big crowd around it and everything. And he said, hey, Sergeant Joyce, let's go get some of that Kool-Aid before it's all gone. And I said, we will. I said, right now there's a big crowd around there. I don't really like that too much. And so there's a big crowd around that container. So let's just stay here, and if it's still there in a few minutes, we'll go over there. And so we continued laying this row of sandbag. Well, about 2 minutes later, a recoilless rifle round hit that can. I don't know if you found a reference to this before.
No, this is new.
Oh, it's new?
Yeah.
Okay. It hit that can, blew it to pieces. I mean, there's just shrapnel, there's pieces left. And I'm sure some of the guys were wounded because, you know, we were kind of on a little lockdown after that. But they had us zeroed in.
Mm-hmm.
They had us zeroed in. So.
Well, something I kind of wondered about, because I know the first two attempts to establish the base by flying people in by helicopters were essentially chased off because they were taking too much fire. The third time they walked up to get started, but it seems to me you would still be under fire while you're trying to do that. And,
yeah.
But had they managed to get enough done before the fire started, or when you got there, were there already positions blasted for the artillery, or were the infantry dug in?
Yes,
okay.
they were already dug in. Now, there was a Pathfinder who was killed on Ripcord in April during one of the initial assaults. I can't remember his name.
All right, now we've been talking about sort of the establishment of base at Ripcord and your own digging in and creating your own bunker for the Pathfinders and so forth, and noting that you had already lost a Pathfinder on Ripcord at that time. Now, once the bunker is established, is that where you stay through the campaign, or do you spend time back at Phu Bai, or how does that work?
No, I set up, or we got the bunker running. We got the Pathfinders all set up. We had their radios. You know, they were trained. They knew what was going on. They knew who to contact. So I left. You know,
Yeah.
my job is finished here. Not really. But I had some other things to do, and one of those, unfortunately, after I set that up in April, in May, let's see, April and then early May. In early May '70, I went back to Camp Eagle. And Captain Caballero, our captain, wanted me to get a group together and do a combat assault on an old Marine fire base called Tun Tavern. And you can find this on the internet too. I mean, Tun Tavern reopening in May of '70. Anyway, it's an old Marine fire base. They said G2 says there's nobody in the area. It's just, you know, they want to open it up. They need a fire base in that area. So everybody's expecting this to be a cakewalk. You know, we're just going to go in there. So we had it all planned with no resistance. We said, we're not going to get any resistance. It's in the foothills. I mean, it's you could see the ocean there. From, you know, what are you going to find? So we come in. I'm on the first bird. We land, and you know, there's nothing here. It's just an old fire base. You know, it's nothing. You don't see any. You know, nobody's been here for a long time. You're looking around on the ground. Nothing. Everything's just old. So we're good to go. And I say, yeah, start bringing them in. So the Chinooks start coming in. They're bringing in, you know, building materials, all kinds of C4, like, you know, culvert halves and timbers and, you know, rations and wire and, you know, all kinds of things. So the first 2 or 3 birds land, and I'm standing there talking to one of the captains from the infantry, and I'm standing there talking to him, and I see out of the corner of my eye, I see this guy running, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, where did he come from? This guy's running. There's a little path, and where's he coming from? It was an NVA soldier, and I'm starting to think to myself, I said, did you just see that? And he said, I saw somebody. And I said, that was NVA. You know, that was NVA. And I'm starting to put 2 and 2 together. I'm thinking, wait a minute. What's NVA doing over here? Especially one guy, and I'm thinking, oh shit, there's tunnels underneath here. There's the old underground CP is there. He was in there taking a nice cool nap. And I'm thinking, oh shit, where's his group? Where is he? Who is he attached to? And about that time, the first RPG came in. And then the small arms came, and then we said, okay, a game changer here. We got a game changer. We're getting major fire from inland, you know, and they don't want us there in the biggest way, and they're throwing some heavy stuff. I mean, you just don't pack RPGs around in the jungle just because you like carrying them around, you know. So we're letting you know, the rear know that we're starting to take some heat here, and meanwhile, I'm out on the top of the fire base on the pad, what we call the pad anyway. The Chinooks are bringing the sling loads in. And I'm kind of directing him, you know, this. I mean, I don't have the radio on or anything. And there's another thing that goes on, but I'll go ahead and tell it. So the fire was coming from my back, and I was moving a lot. You know, I was physically moving a lot just to stay. You know, nobody could draw a bead on me because small arms was there. And they weren't about to waste an RPG on me, so I'm kind of as long as I keep moving, I'm going to be all right. And I'm bringing the birds in, and then they started shooting at the helicopters. And this one CH-47, he's got a load culvert halves, steel, you know, galvanized culvert halves, and he's got a sling load, probably I don't know 4,000 pounds. And he starts taking small arms fire. And he punches off his load from at least 100 feet. At least 100 feet, which is totally verboten. You don't do that. And so I'm, you know, what's his fucking number? What's his number? What got his ass? You know. And meanwhile, I saw the load when he punched off. Then he peels, he chickened out. Yeah, okay, I can understand. You see what happened on Ripcord. But when he punched off his load, it came down and there were some ARVNs, South Vietnamese soldiers that had come in already, and they were kind of bivouacked over here, but a group of them. I thought, oh man, that's not going to be pretty. And so I was even more pissed at this pilot. So, you know, I got his number, you know, I called it in, but there were more aircraft were coming in, and then the RPGs started coming in big time. Apparently they started getting their act together, and they were shooting at the birds. And so I didn't want any part of being underneath the bird when it was coming in. So when one was coming in on final, you know, that crew chief, I could see him, and this was my old rigger days coming in. You know, tell the crew chief where I want it, not me physically standing there. So I told the crew chief where I want it, and I hit the road and went north, you know. just to stay out of the range of the RPGs, because if he hit the bird, I didn't want to be underneath it. And if he was short, I didn't want to be underneath it. So I ran off the north side of the hill and kind of jumped off the edge of the pad, what we call the pad, the edge of the hill. Well, the guy was crazy or something. Anyway, he hit right in front of me, about 15 feet in front of me at the edge of the hill. And so I was kind of like this, and the outer casing of that RPG got me in the leg here. I got a piece that cut me pretty bad on the calf, and then some pieces that stuck in my knee, and cartilages there. It wasn't that bad. I mean, it hurt like hell. And a lot of dirt, because when that shape charge went off, it just, the cloud of dirt, and then the pieces of that casing just carried it all into me. So anyway, I crawled up on the edge of the pad, and somebody saw what happened. They took me and they dragged me over to the side, and one of the other Pathfinders said, I'll take it from here. He said, you'll be all right. Well, while I was off to the side, one of the ARVNs came over to me, and he said, I didn't speak a lot of Vietnamese, but they told me, and I said, yeah, I know, I saw it, and I saw him get his, oh no. Hey, and I said, what? I mean, yeah, he got hit. He's dead. He said, no, and I went, no. So anyway, I made my way over there. I hobbled and crawled half the way, and they could hear him mumbling. They could hear him. So we unloaded the sling load, and with their help, because my leg was bad, peeled the culvert halves off and set them up around us as kind of like a little mini, and you'd hear them, you'd hear them hit the culvert half. When the sling load, and when the net was gone, there was still just a bunch of dirt there. But you could see where the dirt was falling in around his hard hat. He got drove in the ground like a spike, and he was still alive. So with their help, we dug him out and took their helmets and stuff, and we used them as scoops and shovels and pulled him out. He was bleeding from the nose and his ears. And I thought, oh man, this guy's got serious brain damage, I mean, the nose, the ears, he's probably creamed in. Anyway, we dug him out, he was still alive. Dug him out, pulled him off, and his guys, I said, medevac. Why not? So they took him on the medevac, and I waited for the next one. They were going to medevac me, but I was still out there, so. They sent him in, they put him on the bird, and he went off. Well, the next one that came in, next medevac bird came in, they put me on it. They said, no, you need to go. You're starting to bleed pretty bad, so you need to go. So they put me on the bird and took me back to that hospital around Quang Tri, somewhere, I can't remember the name of it. The one where all the medevacs come in.
Okay.
And they triaged me right there and took me in and cut my pants off and stuff. And they said, oh, you're not too bad, Sergeant. We'll get you fixed up all right. And I said, yeah, I know it's not that bad. So they were, debriding it and getting the dirt and crap out of it and stuff. And I looked over to the side, and I saw this ARVN soldier sitting up on a bench off to the side, just sitting there. Had a bandage over his nose like this. And I said, what's wrong with that ARVN over there? They said, oh, he had a broken nose, he broke his nose, and they'll do that sometimes just to get on the aircraft, to get on the medevac. He said, I'm sorry, that's me. But he said, they'll do that sometimes just to get on the aircraft to get out when it's hot, take their hard hat and, and whack themselves in the nose and get some blood going and climb on it. And I said, no, he didn't do that. I said, I dug him out of the ground. Come to find out later on, after they pulled him out, I looked in to see, there was only that much dirt. There was a tunnel underneath there.
Oh.
And so what had happened is that it drove him down, but then the dirt, I mean, it was dry and, just broke through. So the bottom half of his body was in this tunnel, and he was just caught in the dirt, or else he would obviously have been crushed. So it drove him like a spike in the ground. But there was a tunnel underneath. That's the only thing that saved him. So then I was wounded, and then they sent me back to Eagle, and I was on light duty for a little while, and then that's when Pat Bohan was killed, and that got me. Anyway, and then I went back out there.
Okay. So when did he get back to Ripcord?
Bohan was killed 10 July. I was probably there 12 July.
And so then are you there basically from then until the end when they go out, or do you just go in and out, or?
Well, and this is something that I don't know if I have a mental block on it or not, but when I went back out, I got to tell you this story. I got to tell you that for me to get back onto Ripcord on July 12th, unbelievable. Anyway, I'll try to make this quick. I got on the aircraft at the Pathfinder pad there in 101st Aviation. And I was going to Ripcord, and this guy, I noticed, the pilot turned around and he said, "You're going to Ripcord, right?" I said, "Okay, that'll be a ride." I said, "Yeah, I bet it will." And I looked up in grease pencil, he had written 23 days. The pilots would often put how many days short they were, 23 days. So I'm thinking, this guy's got 23 days left in country, and he's flying to Ripcord. And I'm thinking he's crazy or he's brave. But anyway, I think he was just smart when I tell you the story. When we took off, Ripcord's over here. We started going this way. And I kind of knew he was going to fly diversion. So he goes off and he's running these little, staying down and low in the valley, and he works his way back up to the valley that comes down almost straight north. There's a deep valley, and then Ripcord rises right at the end of it. So he's going this way because he knows they got Ripcord zeroed in. All the mortars are there, and all they need to do is drop one in. So he goes off, and then he redlines that Huey. Man, we're running 120 knots. He's redline. He's way past the operational parameters for that aircraft. And when a Huey goes fast, they're almost vertical, and their skids were hitting the tops of the trees. And he said, "Get ready." He said, "My skids are only going to touch once, and if you're not off this aircraft, you're going to go with me." So he said, "Just be ready." He said, "Get on the skids." So I was standing on the skids, and my boots were getting whipped by the branches. I mean, we'd get so close to those trees. And here we were running, over 100 knots. Man. I looked over the co-pilot's shoulder. We were redline. So I could see through the windshield of the aircraft. I could see the base of Ripcord. That's all I could see, just the base of Ripcord. And I said, we're not going to make this. We're not going to make this. This is going to be bad. And so at the very last minute, he just grabs every bit of that collective that he can. I mean, and you just feel the G's, And we're going shooting up the side of that mountain incredible speed. And I'm thinking, we're not coming out of this. This is not going to end well. So we're going up, and he's actually a good 20 feet. I mean, when we cleared that mountaintop, he was a good 20 feet over the drop zone, and he actually reverse cycling, or reverse collective, and we bound. I was on the skid. That skid spread because, I mean, he hit hard. Almost walked off. I mean, and I dove, I had my ruck and my weapon, and I just dove off. Some people ran out behind some sandbags and grabbed me and pulled me behind a wall of sandbags. And I remember through the crack that they drug me through, or this wall of sandbags, I looked out and all I could see was his tail rotor, straight vertical, going off the end of going over the hill, the edge of the hill, at exactly the same time that mortar round hit. Exactly the same time. It was either, he knew that it was zeroed in, and it hit exactly where that helicopter would have been. But it was just 2 seconds. 2 seconds later. So that was my arrival on 12 July back in Ripcord.
All right.
Then I was in charge of the Pathfinder operation on Ripcord for that time, and Mulkey was there. Benny Mulkey was there. He's going to hopefully be here. Toro was there. He lost his legs, and I never saw him again. And who else was there? There was another guy, prize fighter maybe. I can't remember. Anyway, so we were there, and we were just surviving. I mean, we were just trying to handle the aircraft, trying to handle. And I remember at that time, I spoke to a number of the jets that would fly they had 250 pounders and napalm that they'd fly that around Ripcord, and they would talk to me. Mm-hmm. And that was just amazing to me. That, I mean, it's the first time I ever talked to a fast mover. First time ever. Mm-hmm. I mean, and that was amazing. I mean, just, these guys were good, man. They were good. Damn. But anyway, we were throwing everything we could at it. So anyway, that was going on. We couldn't get resupplied. We were getting short of rations. We were on, it was difficult to get a bird onto the hill. As you can tell, I mean, there's no way a CH-47 was going to come in, as obviously by, what happened later. That was bad. Anyway.
So you're on the hill when the Chinook crashes on July 18th?
No.
Okay,
no.
You're going back off again?
I was gone again, and I don't know why, because they came to me, and they said, we need you to come up with an air traffic control plan, because we're gonna extract everything and everybody, and we're gonna throw everything we can at these guys to keep their heads down while we try to bring in the Chinooks and pick up people and as much of the equipment as we can, or destroy the rest of it in place. And we need an air traffic control plan. So I went down in the bowels of Ripcord and in the CP, and we came up with an air traffic control plan. We're gonna come from this area. We're gonna extract here. We're gonna go in this area, so that we didn't get people coming and going and just.
So were you working on that before the Chinook crash? Before the Chinook crash?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And. So after we came up with that plan, I'm gone. and I don't, something going on in here.
Mhm.
I don't know how I got off the hill. I honestly don't know how I got off the hill.
Well, there still were helicopters going in and out. I mean, it was dangerous, but
Yeah.
they were still. I mean, hence the Chinook crash on July 18th. So it was still happening,
Yeah,
and there were even people who flew on it after that explosion. So yeah, I mean, it was still going on. It wasn't easy, but they were still doing it.
but I don't know how I got off.
Okay.
I don't remember it. That's what I'm saying. I don't-
Yeah. Now, when the actual evacuation took place on July 23rd, were you back at? Were you at Evans or Phu Bai, or?
I was at Phu Bai. No, I was at Camp Eagle. I was at Evans. Yeah.
Well, Eagle and Evans are two
Eagle,
different places.
yeah,
So Eagle is the main one. That's where
I was at
based-
Eagle.
Yeah.
I was at the doghouse for the rear for the Pathfinders.
Right. All right. And so, were you involved in helping control that operation or doing things from your end?
Oh, no.
Okay.
Literally, there was nothing that I could do. I mean, it was 101st Aviations
Mhm.
at that point, and the Pathfinders were kind of out of it.
Okay.
Because at that time, Mulkey had been wounded and evac'd, Toro had been wounded and evac'd. They sent in, that's where Prize Fighter went. They sent in Prize Fighter. He got wounded. He was in the Army, got wounded. Who else? I can't remember their names or their call signs. That was Prize Fighter's call sign. But I can't tell you how I got off Ripcord. And during the time it was happening, I remember feeling just so helpless.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just so helpless because we were sitting there back at Doghouse on the radio, and we could hear the radio, and we could hear what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
And what can you do? You can't get there. You can't go there. You can't help. You're not going to help. You're just in the way. I mean, it was already happening. The extraction was going on.
Yeah. And in addition to just getting everybody off the base, there were also operations to extract a couple of different line companies that had been caught on the ground on the 22nd and the 23rd. Now, were Pathfinders, would they be involved in those operations too, or?
Probably not. Not that I remember in any way.
Okay. All right. So once it's over, do you just kind of go back to the regular business of being a Pathfinder again? Because July 23rd, they evac, and then what happens to you after that?
After that, I went to Bastogne. And then I went to Birmingham. And then I must have gone back to Bastogne again, because it was from Bastogne, that's what I left in October. So
Okay. All right.
that was it.
Okay. Now, one of the things that you mentioned previously was you got a decoration from the Vietnamese military. Now, was that for the business with the Connex and the guy being driven into the ground? Okay. What was that there? All right.
Cross of Gallantry, they call
There
it.
you go. So were the last kind of couple of months more routine business and smaller operations?
Yeah. There was nothing, I mean, coming off of that, I mean, how do you top that? I mean, how do you do anything that impresses you after that? I mean, it's no, I was kind of in shock. Most of us were. The ranks of the Pathfinders there were decimated, and we were all in the field. We were all needed in the field after that. I mean, it was just, there was hardly anybody back in the rear.
Okay. Now, I'm not sure that we did this on camera. We talked about it ahead of time. You wind up staying in Vietnam basically for 18 months. I mean, it's normally a year, a tour is 12 months and you go home. How was it that you wound up staying longer?
Well, I actually did go home.
Mm-hmm.
I did a 2-week leave to go home, came back here,
Mhm.
and then went right back, straight back.
Okay. And what was the purpose of the extension? What was the payoff
Well,
for you?
The payoff was I got out of the Army early.
Mhm.
You know, I had 6'5" and change knocked off, and the math was right. So I didn't want to, I wasn't going to stay in the Army,
Mhm.
and so I didn't want to come back and salute officers, spit shine
Okay.
boots, and so.
All right. So your options would have been either spend the last year of your 3 years sitting around on a base someplace, or alternatively spend 6 more months in Vietnam and then go
Right.
home. Okay.
And you have to look at this from my perspective. The first year I spent in Vietnam, I did some pretty amazing things. I mean, I was, I mean, my God, Curry,
Mhm.
you know, and so I figured, hey, I can do this for a
Mhm.
year, and I didn't get a scratch. The next 6 months are a piece of cake.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh
Yeah,
well.
right. I would, 20 May. There you go, got back in April, and in May.
There we go.
So, anyway.
All right. Now, did they make any effort to encourage you to stay?
The, well, they did. I mean, the Army did offer me a re-up package.
Mhm.
You know, they wanted me to, but once I signed the papers for the extension, they kind of. Now, I did get an interesting offer from the Cambodian Army. Yeah, I actually got a certified letter from the Cambodian Army. They would have made me a full colonel, and I would have been in charge of their airborne operations.
Probably a good job to skip, given what happened to the Cambodian
I
Army.
did skip that one, and I'm glad I did. But they were offering me untold of the riches of $60,000 a year.
Wow.
Back then, that was serious money.
All right. Now, over the course, how much contact did you have with officers and stuff, people who were commanding or conducting operations and things? Did you just work with staff officers to plan things, or mostly other enlisted, or?
Staff officers mostly. Colonel, very seldom, but I even deal with field grade officers. Although I talk to them every day. I used to talk to generals every day on the radio. General Zayce had his own aircraft, Roadrunner 442, and he used to fly into Bastogne, and you always knew, Roadrunner 442.
Mm-hmm.
That was General Zayce.
All right. And what was he in charge of?
101st Airborne Division.
Did he replace Hennessy, or was he before him? Or because Hennessy was the one who was supposed to be doing it during Ripcord.
I can't speak to that.
Well, was that while you were still a rigger, or was this when you were a Pathfinder?
This was Pathfinder.
Okay, so you might have come after Hennessy. All right. Anyway, were there any individual officers that impressed you particularly that you worked with, or do they all kind of run together?
They all kind of run together, and not particularly noteworthy, any of them.
Okay. All right. So now you are on your way out. How did they get you back home?
Oh, out of Vietnam?
Yeah.
Well, that was kind of a shocker. I was on Bastogne, and I was getting short, but I was fine just staying on Bastogne.
Mm-hmm.
Bastogne was a good, safe place for me. I felt comfortable there, and I think they knew it. And so I was there until, let's see, when was it? I was there until the 15th, either the 14th or the 15th of October. Can't remember exactly when. I left Bastogne on a Huey, flew back to Doghouse. went to, they put me on a helicopter to Phu Bai, got on a 130 down to Tan Son Nhut, kind of reverse course, and then they processed me in Vietnam at Tan Son Nhut Air Base, put me on the Flying Tiger, and I was out of there. I'll tell you one last story. And well, first of all, and then from Tan Son Nhut on Flying Tiger, we went, I guess, non-stop McCord, I think it was. That was impressive, 18 hours, something like that. I didn't know they could hold that much fuel. But I remember, and this will be my last story, I'll tell you. I remember leaving Vietnam. We were on that Flying Tiger airline, and we were sitting on the tarmac there at Tan Son Nhut, and we were starting to take off, and you heard the jets roar up, you know, and they started rolling down the runway, and all these guys started cheering. I didn't, because I know what they could do. And they were screaming and cheering, yay! Where I'm saying, oh, no, we're not out of there yet. We're not out of there yet. And so then, wheels up. Yeah, even more people, you know. No, you guys, you fools, you don't know. And I happened to have a window seat. And I remember, and it was getting dusk, it was just dark. And we started flying out, and I looked over at the window and I could see the coastline of Vietnam passing. And once it got out of sight, then I went, yeah! And everybody goes, what? Anyway.
Yeah. Right. One thing I forgot to ask was, did you take an R&R while you were in Vietnam?
I did.
Where'd you go?
I went to Australia. I had a wonderful time in Australia. In fact, it was Christmas, 1969. I took 7 days and went to Sydney. Beautiful place, especially at Christmas time. Beautiful place. Wonderful time.
Was it hard to go back to Vietnam from there?
It was, but you know, it's your job. So a lot of guys didn't, as I understand. A lot of guys stayed. Wound up in handcuffs going home anyway.
Yeah.
But anyway.
That's the idea. All right. So we got back to the States. Did they process you and discharge you right away, or once you get back? Or?
Yeah, they did. In fact, when we landed at McCord, they took us over to Fort Lewis, where they processed us again, gave us our final pay, in cash, by the way. And so you got paid up to the day, in cash, whatever was due to you. You got an civilian airplane ticket home. You went through the line where you get your last set of Class A's, you know, and you get your new Class A's, and everything's all, you know, your medals. You make up your own little badges and stuff, whatever you got, and get all spick and span, get on the plane, and you go home. And when you get home, you take off that uniform, and you hang it in the closet, and that's where it's still hanging today.
All right. Now, but you went home in uniform?
Yes.
Okay. Did you have any trouble along the way?
I didn't have any trouble along the way. I was probably a little dumb to what was going on here stateside. I didn't find that out until I got to Springfield. But I did have an interesting interview. I had my Class A's on, I had my jump boots on, I was looking all right. Sergeant E5, Screaming Eagle patches on both shoulders. And I remember I was in one of the airports, I can't remember one of them, it wasn't SeaTac, it's somewhere else. And I saw this kid you know, obviously had just joined the Army. I mean, he was not in good shape. I mean, he had the basic, uniform, and his tie was halfway off. His coat was over his shoulder. His shirt tail was hanging out, and he was walking down the airport. And I'm on my way home. I had actually already left the Army, and he's walking down. And I said, "Hey, soldier." He comes over to me. "Yes, sir." I said, "You're out of uniform. Fix it now. Now." Standing there and puts all this stuff together, and I said, "Now, go about your business. Don't you ever do that again." If he only knew I was on my way home. Anyway, I did my duty. Hopefully he became a good soldier.
All right. So once you get back and you're back in civilian life, what do you do?
Well, I find out how unpopular Vietnam veterans were. And the first thing I did, wrote this. It hasn't been off since. It has not come off my face since. It's been longer, shorter, but no, I grew that, and then I lied about where I had been for the last 2.5 years.
So you found you couldn't get a job if people knew you were a veteran?
Well, I was going back to school.
Okay.
So there wasn't a job
Yeah.
thing, but I did, initially, people would say, "Hey, Jim, I haven't seen you. Where you been?" I said, "I'm in Vietnam." "Oh, yeah? Okay, well, good luck with that." It's kind of like, what? And then, you watch the news, and, and you kind of catch on. And so then you grow this, and you get your hair a little bit long, and you start saying, "I've been working out west in California," just so you didn't have to say where you've been. And that really got to me. That really, really got to me, because I left a piece of me in Vietnam, and I did that for whatever reason. I did it, and it was not appreciated, and that pissed me off. I mean, because that didn't match with my values, and that hurt.
And did you have other issues in terms of just adjusting to being a civilian again?
Well, I had what we now know and call frequently PTSD. We didn't know what it was then. They called it shell shock in World War II.
Oh, yeah, and then combat fatigue. And,
yeah. But we didn't have any name for it in Vietnam. And most of it was visuals, things you can't get rid of, and that's difficult. And the others, it's psychological. But I found that you put that stuff in a little part of your brain up there. You put it up in there, and you don't wall it off. You can go there anytime you want to, but you just choose not to go there. And that's the best way. Because when you try to ignore and you try to say that it didn't happen, then you're in direct conflict with yourself, because you know it did happen. So, and that's what I think with guys that really, really got deep over the hill, they tried to completely block it out, and you can't do that. You got to be able to go there, for as long as you want, just for a second or two. You can go there, and then you can come back if you need to. So that was the way I dealt with it, and but I don't think that's the way they deal with it anymore.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of different ways, and there's just different forms that this kind of thing takes.
Yeah.
It's very personal. So what kind of career did you wind up in?
Well, I went back to school. I got a degree in biology. I was going to be a physician. And I went back to a really good school, and I got good grades, and MedCats were pretty good, and applied to like 8 or 9 different medical schools, and I didn't get in. And that particularly hurt because I knew the people that I went to school with. Now remember, I was a little bit older than these guys now, because I was, you know, I'm older. These are younger people, and I know that people that were younger than me that didn't have the grades or the MedCats that I had. I know they got accepted to medical school, and I found out that's because their dad was a doctor. And that's a slap in the face. That's another slap in the face. And so, so I got a job working in a laboratory for a nuclear power plant, and worked my way up in the quality control department for a nuclear power plant. Worked up from the laboratory to, testing materials, breaking cylinders and rebar and steel and concrete and making concrete cylinders and all that stuff, that construction, heavy duty construction. And I worked my way up actually to be a level 3, which is the top level 3 nuclear inspector. And so then I had a marketable skill, and I worked on a number of different nuclear plants. Here in Missouri, in Fulton, built those 2 power plants. And then Savannah, Georgia, Florida Power and Light at 2 of St. Lucie Unit 2. And then I got married. Married a lady who was the Dean of Students at West Virginia Institute of Technology. And I thought, it'd be kind of cool to become an engineer, a civil engineer, and to know, now that I've spent that much time learning about concrete and how to test it and the steel, and how do they know that column's got to be exactly 12 inches? How do they know that steel's got to be just right here, just through there? So I thought that'd be fun, so I went to school there at West Virginia Tech and got my degree in civil engineering. And then my advisor said, well, you've got a degree in biology, right? And I said, yeah. Well, biology and civil engineering, you'd make a great environmental engineer. So, okay. So he got me an interview with Virginia Tech, and I got my master's in environmental engineering from Virginia Tech. And then I got a job working for a large national engineering firm. And worked for them for 12 years, and then started my own company, environmental engineering firm in Houston. And we had offices in Houston and Boston and Los Angeles. And I sold those in 2010.
All right.
I'm retired.
Okay, to look back on the whole thing, how do you think your time in the service affected you? What did you take out of it? And you got the PTSD side of it, but what else did you take out of it?
Oh, the confidence that I can do anything I want to do. And that directly translates into starting my own business. Hey, piece of cake. I mean, I've known other guys that say, oh man, I'd love to be, I wish I'd have had the guts to do that like you did, They say, well, when you know that you can handle anything that's ever thrown at you, why not?
All right. Well, the whole thing makes for a pretty remarkable story, so I'd just like to close by thanking you for taking the time to share it today.
Well, thanks for asking, Larry. Few people have asked about it.